Good morning, everybody. I am Tommy, and you are on the Love Boat. What's happening? I put up the Monk comment because Monk says, by the way, Kristen Melissa, you rock, and you do. You really do. I'm glad that you're here. Jane Aldrich, good to see you. Cindy, what's happening? Hey, Valerie, good to have you here. Barbara's here. Isis Flame, welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey, Sharon. Cindy G. You know what, Cindy G? I hate to put you on blast, but I'm going to. You know, every once in a while, someone will reach out and they will say something that is just kind. And somebody wrote something about you, and I'm not going to put them on blaster, but you're affecting people in the chat. And someone reached out to me to tell me that. Things that you're saying, it gets back to the guru show, right? Every once in a while, people are gurus. I had somebody guru me this morning. They probably don't know that. I sent them an email right before I went live, but they'll probably realize it shortly after this. Jay Rambo, how are you? Glad that you're here. What's up, Roberta? I'm glad you're here as well. This is a video that I don't know how many times I've done. The fun thing about this is that when you work as a public speaker, there's a framework that you have to stay within. And what I do here, there's no framework whatsoever that I have to stick with. Grace Twinkletoes, good to see you. So often I'm able to, what's the word I'm looking for? I have a bullet point, and it might be one bullet point that I kind of want to hammer home. And there are a bunch of you that reached out and said, since you're rebooting, I'm really going to start this, which is both really cool and really depressing at the same time, because obviously it means that a lot of you were watching and not starting, but that's journaling. You know what I mean? It takes a while to start pulling the trigger on this. The question that I ask all the time is, who are you? Amy, good to see you. Salutations to you too, my sister. The question is, who are you? And I bring this up all the time in journaling because sadly, you probably don't have any idea. I mean, that's kind of how it goes. And one of the things that jumps out off the page when you begin to see other cultures is that we being the civilized parts of the planet. And I use air quotes on the civilized part. But on very developed countries, advertising becomes a huge part of what it means to be in a country like America or Great Britain or any of the other countries, Canada. Chicka Cherry Cola, good to see you. Hey, Brock Bandy, who are you? Nice Alice reference in there. But truthfully, more often than not, we're trying to conform to what society thinks is cool, society thinks is popular. And I know this because I wore a lot of acid wash. Yeah. I sported leather pants at a period of time in my life. I also had, you bet, the Kentucky waterfall, the mullet. There's a picture of Johnny Scoville and I that was taken where, you know, you used to drive out to a place. Sears did it. We never went to Sears, but there was a place that you would go out and get portraits done. What's that? Montgomery Ward also did it, Monkey Ward. But you would drive out and get portraits done at a portrait studio. Right? We didn't have these things, right? Valerie says, I think the U.S. is overly developed. Trust and believe the U.S. is overly developed. It is our defining characteristic in the United States. Barbara Waite, good to see you. It's very hard to not let expectations of others inform who we are, especially people we care about. You know, I kind of give you a pass if it's people you care about. We shouldn't do it one way or the other. But I kind of understand when we allow, but I didn't wear a mullet because people in my family thought you would look a lot cooler with a little party on top and business or business on top and party in the rear. That I wasn't doing that because of somebody I cared about. I was doing that because it became a thing. I wore acid wash jeans because it became a thing. And I understand being affected by popular culture. I understand all of that. What's scary is when you don't know that you're being affected by popular culture. Hey, Ashley G, I wore a lot of stuff, not because my friends had begun to warn it, but because the videos. Remember MTV? They used to actually show videos. Those puffy pants and you know, Z Cavariccis and Gerbeau jeans and Guess. There was a style that was being worn in the videos. I wasn't doing this because anybody I even cared about. I was doing this because this is what they told me was cool. I now live in a place. Jay Rambo says, I'm 54, not always sure who I am, but I work every day to who I aspire to be. You know what? You're stealing my 25-minute in part of this, but that's okay. The idea is to figure out who you aspire to be. That is literally the most important thing that you can do. You know what? Kristen Lynn and I need to do a show together. I would do one on Sunday if Kristen, I'm not putting her on blast, but we do need to do another one. She was a lot of fun to do a show with. Many countries are overdeveloped. We forget to care for others. People chase happiness. You found a place that they find happiness in who they are, unlike what we used to do. Good Lord, that's perfect. Cindy G. You know what I say? Cindy G is impressing people. That's perfect. It's literally perfect. Taylor Miller, you look fantastic in green. Thank you so much. Cindy, that's exactly right. It's perfect. If you figure out who you want to be, journaling helps this, by the way. The journal assignment today, that would be a perfect example. When I got sober, I didn't believe in journaling. I just believed that heroin had landed me in prison and stolen what was going to end up being 15% of my life under the best of circumstances. If I lived to be 100 years old, I was going to be donating 15% of my time on this planet to the government. That just didn't work for me. And it really messed up my head. And when I met my mentor, he realized he was so much smarter than me and so much smarter than most people I've met in terms of interpersonal communication. I don't mean he could tell you facts going back to, but in interpersonal communications, he had really learned how to get the most out of folks. The trophy is on the way, Monk. It is in a box on the way here. Shipping things in a box to South America has presented itself as a problem. I know people are going, come on, Tommy, it's been a month. I have tried shipping paperwork that I am now waiting 45 days on. It's difficult. So it is on the way, I promise. But the importance of that, knowing how to communicate with people, especially those who are, well, enslaved, right? I was addicted to heroin. Having a conversation with somebody, when he said, you're going to have to journal, I went, I'm not going to journal. And I didn't say to him, I can't look at the stuff that I write because it makes me feel like I am mentally deficient in a lot of really big ways, right? So he knew what I would say. So when I said I'm not going to journal, I've often said, he said to me, if you're not going to journal, we're not going to do this. He didn't say that on day one, right? He let that go. He went, okay, here's what I think you ought to do. What you should do is a 3-step program to try to quit. And the first step was that I was going to list all the reasons I wanted to get sober. Now, you will hear people say all the time, you got to do it for yourself. If you're not going to get sober for yourself, it'll never work. That's BS. Nobody gets sober for themselves. I'm sorry, they don't. You have to stay sober for yourself. But you're not pulling the trigger intelligently. When you quit, there's 72 more hours of whatever dope you're doing still in your body. You've been strung out for decades, right? You're not making any good decisions. You're sure as shit not quitting for yourself. I'm sorry. So I made a list of all the reasons I wanted to quit, and they had nothing to do with me. I wanted to quit for my parents. I wanted to quit for my brother. I wanted to quit for my kids, right? These are the things that made sense to me. Then he said, make a list of all of the things that a person who knew everything about you would say if they were to describe you. Think of it as God, right? But if they were to describe you, no BS, just complete honesty. And it was terrible. It was one of the most depressing exercises I've ever done in my life. And right about that time, I was ready to quit this and say, this is no fun. I'm not going to be able to pull this off. But the third assignment was, what do you wish they would have said about you? If someone who knew you, right? If there was somebody that said, I know Tommy Scovo better than anybody in the world, what would you want them to say about you? I'd want them to say I was honest. That was the first thing I wrote. I'd want them to say that I'm not a liar, that if I told them I was going to do something, I was going to do it, that they could trust me, right? And I started to make that list, not realizing that what I was doing was describing the attributes of the person that I wanted to become. I was putting down on paper who I was going to be, not because MTV showed me videos, not because the billboard said you're going to be a lot cooler if you wear this clothing. You're going to be a lot cooler if you he can't be a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarettes as me. You this is who you really are. This is not the affectations of society of what you think cool is, because I don't know about for women. I don't understand them nearly as well as I wish I did, but I understand what it meant to be a man. And we, especially those of us who grew up in the 80s, being cool was a thing, right? The kids of today don't have Fonzie, but we grew up with Fonzie. And he was the coolest person on earth, right? He walked into the room and, right, everybody went, ooh. He just bumped the jukebox with his elbow and it played whatever tune he wanted to. Like, he was the coolest guy in the world, right? I'm glad you all got that Rolling Stones reference. I have to work every day to not let the American rat race stress me out and take time to enjoy the important things, family, kindness, and living in the moment. I'm telling you, right? That's the goal. Living in the moment is the ultimate goal. It's the ultimate goal. Your past will determine how your present and your future run. That's just a fact. So if you don't come to grips with the past, then you're not going to have a pleasant today. And your tomorrow you'll never plan for, because you'll be living all of the trauma from your past. So as you start to work through it and peel the onion and do all of that, what happens is you clean the closet out. And when there's nothing in the closet, you're in the present moment. Somebody does something to piss you off. I watched my brother yesterday grab the journal during the afternoon. And I didn't say anything, right? I didn't want him to be self-conscious about it or anything else, but I watched him grab that thing. I know something was about to go into that closet. I don't know what it is, none of my business. But something was about to go into his closet. So he went in the other room and he started writing about it. And then this morning we were talking, and he'll probably talk about it on his show, so I won't steal his thunder. But he had a dream. Sometimes dreams can be very, very rugged. And he got up in the middle of the night. Taylor was 29, so he did not grow up watching Fonzie. Wow. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Here's the deal. I don't know what kids are watching growing up today because it's changed so much. But anyway, Johnny Scoville in the middle of the night got up to journal about that dream. Because if he didn't, it was going to go in his closet. Or he was going to forget it, and he didn't want to forget it. When you live in the present, you're not putting anything away. You're not sticking anything into that closet that becomes the trauma for tomorrow. The thing that's going to affect you 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. And if you're 70, you can start this today, I promise you. Here's the good news. I cleaned out my closet in about a year and a half. And I had 46 years of putting stuff in my closet, a lot more than the next person. I promise. When you break the law for a living, you're putting a lot in your closet. To be able to look at yourself in the mirror and still shave when you steal for a living, you're filling that closet with both feet, right? You're shoving stuff in there as tight as you can. I probably had a slightly larger walk-in than the next person. But within 2 years, I had almost everything out of the closets. Today, epiphanies still happen. Things will happen where I go, oh my God, I haven't thought about that. And I go and I sit down and I journal it out. Things that I didn't remember that, if you can't remember it, you certainly cannot get it out. It gets rid of trauma. That's what we're doing here, Ashley G. This is what journaling is about. Journaling is about removing trauma from your past so that it does not affect your present, where we live in happiness or misery. The present is where everything good is going to happen or everything bad. What happens tomorrow can't mess with you until tomorrow. What happened in the past is over. Right? I had the things that have happened to me in prison, but I'll tell you something. I hung by my hands on handcuffs. Now, I could stand up. I could put my hands above my head, but if they leave you there for 3 hours, I promise you can't keep your hands above your head for 3 hours. Give it a try. It's not possible. By hour 3, you're hanging those puppies. And I had hit a cop. So when these guys would walk by, I was in what was, for all intent and purposes, like a phone booth. If you ever watch prison shows, you'll see one. They're usually right out in front of the LT's office. And they're a place to put somebody who's out of control. Like if you're having an episode, which is what they call drug problems in prison, usually on K2. Someone's freaking out and screaming and attacking people. They lock them in a phone booth that's just bars. Looks like the Opie, the jail from Mayberry RFD, except it's no bigger than a phone booth. Now, they didn't bother locking the front door of it. Since my hands were cuffed above it, there was no reason for that. That meant every time a cop walked in, they could just give you a shot in the kidneys or punch you in the stomach or whatever. And I'm not saying I didn't deserve it, for the record. I mean, nobody should do that kind of cruelty, but I did punch a cop in the face, right? And injured him like it was a good one. As far as punches go, and he wasn't a good person, but there's not a reason to do what I did ever. There isn't. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. There's plenty of reasons to kick the crap out of somebody, but what that guy did to me didn't rise to the occasion that I should have punched this dude. Wasn't a good idea. But anyway, I was getting beat up. I was getting tagged on. If I didn't unpack that, and I have written an entire journal full of stuff on that day, what I remember from that day, and not just the ass kick, and I can describe that to you in 2 minutes? I just did. The emotions, the sitting there. At one point, my mouth was filling with blood, not from being hit after I was handcuffed, but from getting roughed up in the process of them removing me from the visiting room. I had been in the little bathroom where you strip out, and them coming in to get me, 30 officers deep. I got messed up on my face and I looked bad, but I was bleeding into my mouth, and I would spit it onto the floor, and there was a huge pile of blood on the floor. And I thought to myself, I could hawk this in the face of the next guy that comes in here. And working through that, the reasons why I thought that, the reasons why I didn't do that, and everything that happened to me, I have spent hundreds of pages working through that. I have zero trauma from that. I can sit and talk about this. It doesn't F with my blood pressure. It doesn't get my heart racing. I don't get sweaty palms. I don't feel anything from that. It is so far removed from me. It's like talking about a book I read, because that's trauma that I worked through again and again and again. But it was fairly recent trauma. Right? I had told the story 50 times since it happened to me. So even though I hadn't sat down to journal it, even though it was in a closet, I had talked a lot about it. And talking to someone about something nonstop is very much like journaling, except you're going to tint it. I want to look a little cooler. You know what I mean? I don't want to make it sound like I was hanging there looking like I was whimpering. And there were times I absolutely was. You want to make it sound like you're Bruce Willis from Die Hard, but you're not. And anybody that tells you a story that way is probably tinting it so that you get an image of your head of a very cool dude in there, because that's how guys are. So, but having worked through all that, I have zero trauma from that. In fact, no shit that this makes sense or not, that is probably the moment that I changed the most on planet Earth. For real. That was the moment that I decided I don't want to be this person anymore. Like, this has to stop. It took a long time for it to actually take. I needed a mentor. I was not a guy that was going to pull this off on my own. But I started praying for help, right? I honestly started praying for help. I started getting books that I could read about fixing yourself. None of that took. I read a crap load of books. I knew the book smart on all of it. I needed a mentor. I needed a therapist. My therapist was a black convict that had shot 2 people in the head, but the best therapist I've ever met. All of my joy takes place right now. On Thursday, I'm going to go work with the people that I worked with last Thursday. The boy that lost his brother, that found out that info while we were there on his 4th day of kicking heroin. By the way, these guys probably aren't kicking heroin. I've been researching the crap out of this, and what they're kicking is a drug that they call H. And H is not technically heroin. Heroin in Guayaquil goes for about $5 a gram. H goes for $1 a gram. And they have found cement, they have found lime, they have found some really disgusting stuff that they're putting in this to cut it with. It's a white powder, it's not a tar substance. Heroin in this part of the world is tar. It's not refined. It is very much what I was addicted to in the United States. These guys are doing a white powdered substance, which has enough opiate in it that these guys can slam it and not be sick. But it is most assuredly something cheaper than heroin. Anyway, I'm going to be there on Thursday. Do you remember the joy I had last Thursday? I'm not getting any of that from this Thursday. It's a thought. It's a plan. It's where I'm going to be. For all we know, we'll get a flat tire. Right? Until that becomes reality, you're not going to get emotion out of it. Is this making sense? This is a past, a present, and a future. I'm still taking joy from what happened the previous Thursday. I'm still taking meaning in my life from what happened the previous Thursday, but it's not here. And having journaled about it, I took away the fantastic things, and the painful stuff that was so hard in the moment, I have worked through. We don't talk about this. The worst we had was seeds in our weed, right? We were very lucky compared to the people who are here today. But I came back and I talked about what a beautiful moment that was, holding that boy, a young man, and being there for him in the moment was maybe the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I've never felt more like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, I could have lost my brother when I was locked up, or my brother could have got the news that I just got killed in prison because I was going hard to the paint until I got sober. I was in the dope game, right? I was to stay high when that stuff's $500 a gram. You got to do a lot of really twack stuff. You got to do a lot of stuff that puts your life in. So I'm going through all of these emotions while this kid is going through his. I could have shoved that in the closet and just held on to the, wow, am I doing good? What a good dude I am. Well, there's a lot of shit that went along with that I need to work through, or it's going to taint the next time I'm there. It's going to taint today. Yeah, journaling is about the release of unresolved trauma. You get it? Who are you? Sadly, I don't think most of us can answer that question. And again, I'm not trying to do this one with my legs crossed and tell you that I'm better or that I'm a guru, but I journal. I freaking promise you, I do more of it than the next guy, right? I probably do more of it than the next two guys. And it's because the amount of trauma that I created in my own life. I'm not talking about things done to me. The things done to me probably took 3 or 4 days to journal through. The stuff that I did to myself, and learning the difference between them, right? I have been a victim in my life. It happened when I was very young, and there was nothing I could have done in my life to avoid what happened to me, right? That means that you're a victim. Then there's nothing wrong with admitting you're a victim unless you groove to it. Unless you decide that this victimhood thing's kind of cool. People treat me different if I'm a victim, right? I get a pass because there are books, there are entire industries designed to make you feel like a victim and then give you a hug. Well, you need to give yourself a hug. You need to work through any time you were victimized, because shit, there are times you're victimized and there's nothing you could have done about it. That's 5% of life. 95% is how you're going to deal with it. I have met people that have endured things that made that beating in the cage look like a birthday party at the age of 6. I have worked with people whose trauma is so heinous that I had to journal about it for months. And they're the happiest people I've ever met. I'll tell you a story because it's so rugged that it's hard to believe. And she wouldn't care if I told the story. But I was in a state joint. First time I went away, I didn't go to the feds. I went to the state. And there was a woman who said to me, my understanding is you worked as a public speaker. And I said, I did. She said, we have a Toastmasters deal in here, which is a very popular thing on the street. I was a member of it. And it's where you teach people public speaking. And she said, we don't get people coming through here who are members of Toastmasters on the street, or people who are comfortable with public speaking. Would you be willing to come up and talk to the fellas? And I did I don't know that I want to do that. And she said, I will get you a bucket of KFC. And I said, sure, I would love that. Well, she was a doctor, an MD. Then she got she moved on to becoming a psychiatrist. She still worked as an MD at the prison, but she also worked as the prison psychiatrist. So she was one of the most educated people I've ever met. And she was married to a guy that owned all of the local McDonald's in the city that I lived in. He was a former football player, black guy. Absolutely just a great dude. I had met him a couple of times. I didn't know that he had a wife. But I met her. She was a white woman. And I only bring that up because in prison, there are white people that are going to have a real problem with the fact that she had a black husband. So she dealt with a lot of crap from that. But the black guys gave her a pass that they never would give a white woman in prison. There's always a little bit of animosity. And I mean, as across the board, not each person, but across the board, there's always a little animosity to white people that work in prisons. A lot of times they're not trusted. But she was different because of her relationship to her husband, and just the fact that she was super open, super honest, and there for the inmate, which is rare. She had 2 assistants that worked for her. Both of them black, both of them really big dudes. And one day they got into what would later be called pink cocaine. Back then it was called 2C2, right? They call it Tucci. But it is not cocaine. It's called pink cocaine because they added food color to it because it makes it easier to distinguish. There's nothing in it that makes it pink. They add stuff to make it pink. But they managed to get Tucci inside. And it is not a drug that makes people make good decisions. It's no drug makes people make good decisions. But Tucci has more of a dissociative effect. In other words, it's more like a trip drug. And these guys decided that they were going to assault her while on this. And they had managed to lock themselves in a room that has windows, a crap load of them. They closed the blinds and they began to sexually assault this woman. And she was able to scream for help. And the DIRT team, which is the direct response team in prison, these guys can come in with guns if necessary, which is not something you see very often in a prison. But they did. They came in with ARs, right? Choppers, sweepers, the guys call them. The guns that they want taken off the streets. These are automatic weapons. And they lit these guys up. The blinds had been shut, but these guys went over, broke a window, and screamed orders and ended up shooting these guys repeatedly. One did not make it. He died on the spot. The other survived. He survived because the second he got off of the top of her for the assault, she performed CPR on him until the med flight got there. I'm not made of that. I don't know anybody on planet Earth that's made of that. But she kept her assaulter alive until medevac got there and literally got an award, not because of the fact that what she did was so over the top, but because she saved the life. This person should have been dead. There was no way. The amount of blood loss, all of it. She was running around, grabbing patches, putting stuff on him the whole time, doing CPR. And the story is kind of legend in the prison. So after one night of speaking, I said to her, the story of saving the dude's life, she said, that happened. And I said, I don't know how a person does that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And she said, I just kept thinking to myself, what happens in somebody's past to turn them into that kind of a monster? That's a woman that's done some journaling. You know what I'm saying? That's a person that isn't trying to appear like something to someone else. That's a person who knows who they are. I said, I assume he's at Ely, which is one of the nastiest prisons, a supermax kind of a prison. And she said, no, he was there for a few years. He's on this yard now. I said, you got to be kidding. She said, no, I had to sign off on that. He has come in and apologized to this woman. She offered him his job back. He couldn't take it, which makes a lot of sense to me. As a dude, I can't imagine being in the same room as somebody that you did that to ever and being able to look at him. That's a concept I can't wrap my brain around. How does that person smile and go back to the same job on a yard that the same person is on? How do you sign a piece of paper going, yeah, I don't care if he's on this yard? And I'm not joking. I'm not saying this for your benefit or anything else. I said, how do you do that? And she said, a lot of therapy and a lot of journaling. And I said, it probably helped that you were a psychiatrist. She said, I was not a psychiatrist when that happened. But through the process of journaling and figuring out things, she wanted to understand what turns people from the little kid that somebody puts a hat on and gloves before they put him outside in the snow into someone capable of doing that. I'm not made of that. And I don't have enough life left to journal enough to be that person. But I would like to be. No joke. I would like to be able to look at every human being And when they're the most reprehensible pieces of human filth that have ever been created, I would like to have enough compassion to say, how does that happen? Because it probably didn't happen with a great childhood, right? The reason that this story is important is less about journaling and more about the desire, right, to know who you are. That woman knows who she is. You feel me? That woman knows who she is. Earlier on, someone said, I'm writing about who I want to be, right? Who I'm trying to be. That's the person that I wrote down everything that I wanted to be. That's the person I want to be. I want to be so damn evolved that I don't go like this and throw my phone against the wall because I'm not good at technology. I want to be so evolved that nothing on this earth pisses me off. And I'm telling you, you're going to find that in the pages of your own journal. Because the reason that you get angry at the smallest stuff in the world will tell you, that journal will make you understand why that happens. Do you know why I get angry at technology? Because when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I realized that I had a learning disability. I couldn't articulate that. I just knew there were things I couldn't do that other kids had no problem doing. And I knew that every time I looked down at my writing, I felt dumb. And I hate feeling dumb. If you go back and watch all of the videos on YouTube, you will see all of my videos. You will see videos where something goes wrong. You can't hear me, you can't something. And we have a funny crowd, and there'll be a joke or two in the audience. You'll watch me disappear really quickly. You can pick on me for anything on earth, but if you're picking on me for something that makes me feel stupid, I'm going to disappear. Because if I don't, I'm going to break something. I'm not that evolved. I'm evolved enough to know I got to get out of that situation. But there's a hangover for the rest of my life from the days I felt dumb. And I dealt with feeling dumb not by communicating, right? I wasn't any good at communication, apparently. I wasn't able, because of the world that I lived in, to say I feel dumb. I need help. Right now I feel stupid. Those are words I couldn't utter. So I chose a different route. I didn't go down the drug route the reason other people do. You know, it became that. But in the beginning, what it was for me was just as much, I didn't have to think about it for a while. That was great. Turning off your mind was, but what got great was when I realized that people went, no, he's not stupid. He's lazy. That sounded a lot better to me. Or teachers that said, no, he doesn't have a learning disability. He's doing drugs. He's a druggie. He hangs out with those kids. He's a bad kid. That to me was so much better, right? That sounded so much better than stupid that I grabbed onto it with both hands. And that spun off into a whole new direction because it wasn't enough to just be stoned. The bad kid thing, that was great. So I started to commit crime. I started to do all kinds of things that I created the person that I wanted the world to look at. See, it was nice if you're a criminal and you have the benefit of being 6'2" and a couple of 100 pounds. If you're a criminal, bald, goatee, right? I've had this look for a long time. This is, you're less likely to have somebody laugh at you. And you're sure as shit not going to have somebody call you stupid. You're different. You chose that life. Coming to the point at which I am completely at ease with the cat that doesn't write correctly, the person that transcribes letters, right? I have a good wide dyslexic streak in me. And as we do as human beings, I developed this because you can't screw up speaking as a dyslexic. I can talk my ass off. The problem is it was to reinforce I'm a bad guy, I'm not a dumb guy. If I had just taken all of that, if I had started journaling when I was 12, no telling where I'd be, right? No telling where I'd be. If I had found a teacher like my mentor when I was 12, who would have said to me, stupid, man, you're one of the smartest people I ever met. You just have a problem with letters. Because this may come as a shock to you, But I heard that the first time when I was 46. To have somebody sit down and say, you're an intelligent cat. I've never met anybody as intelligent. I was blown the hell out of the chair, for real. I never felt smart a day in my life. They're getting better at stuff like this. Teachers are doing better. The drugs are our old way of trying to feel in balance. Most first introduced their representative, not the true you. Yeah, correct. It is a lubricant to pretending you're somebody else. You want to pretend you're somebody else as a human being, your brain will fight back, I promise. It goes against who you are, right? And that causes internal conflict, right? Cognitive dissonance. You're going to have a couple of things in your brain fighting at the same time. You want to get rid of that? Dope will fix that. And I don't care what the dope is. I mean it. I could drink, and I hate drinking. I mean, I like 2 beers. 3 beers I do not enjoy. But I can drink to get the same effect. I could huff glue. I never have. But I promise you, I can use anything to get the same effect. Johnny Scoville used a guitar. You can use anything if it distracts you enough that you're not having those 2 opposing things going on in your brain. If you can distract yourself. Johnny did a show yesterday that I thought was absolutely freaking amazing. And we probably haven't stopped talking about the concept for more than 10 minutes since the show ended. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm fascinated by this. I can't tell you how many people we've met who said, no, I was an alcoholic in the United States. What? No, you're an alcoholic. You're an alcoholic. There was a guy here that says he drank a case of beer a day. A case of beer a day. Now he says, every once in a while, I'll have 2 or 3 of them. And I said, every once in a while, meaning what? He's like, once a week. Sometimes I'll do 4 or 5 days in a week because there are people around or whatever, or we go out a lot. He's like, when I go out, I almost always have a couple of beers. I've read enough books to know that doesn't happen very often. Now, maybe he was not addicted. He was just dependent, right? What are the odds I'll meet more than a half a dozen people in this country who found out that they were not addicted, they were just dependent on their substance only after moving here. And one of the cats keeps a ball of heroin at his house because they don't sell pain meds here. They don't. Like, you're not going to get a prescription for pain meds here. They don't believe in opiates. Plain and simple. Like, you're not getting them. You get oral surgery. Because I said to the guy, like, I don't want anything with opiates in it. And he did the dog thing with the head. He's like, oh, we don't do that here anyway. He wrote me a prescription for a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug that you could not get anywhere over the counter. Anywhere. Like, this stuff's rugged. 1 every 24 hours. Really, really strong pills. But they don't do the opiates. So this guy said, yeah, I get migraines every once in a while. So I keep a ball of heroin in the house. And I said, and do what? He goes, eat it. He'll cut it off into a piece, put it in, like they call it parachuting, drug addicts call it. You put it in a piece of tissue paper and you swallow it. And he said, knocks it out like that. And I said, and you don't have a desire to do it the next day? He's like, not unless I still have a migraine. This makes that much sense to me. But the guy that did the Rat City, right? The guy that did that experiment, his famous quote was, maybe you don't have a chemical problem. Maybe you have a cage problem. Maybe the problem is your cage. But these kind of epiphanies, these kind of thoughts, I read all these books. I read the Rat City stuff. I read all of this stuff. But when you start taking your thoughts and putting them down on paper as they pertain to trauma in your life, light bulbs start doing this number. Johnny Scoville came to the concept of talking about this particular thing because of something he journaled. It blows me away. It really does. The expat forums are filled with people who live here. They're also filled with a crapload of people that don't live here, right? People who are talking about moving here. And one of the questions you see all the time is because there is something called narcotic expats. These are people that move to countries because they think their drugs will be a lot cheaper. And people that will say, hey, you know, is it true you can buy anything over the counter? And the expats will go, yeah, you don't need a prescription to get most substances. You can go in and get whatever. So I could get OxyContin. No, they don't do opiates at all. And the people will then, they'll say, I'm done. And I have read more than once expats who wrote, you might want to come down here and see if you're actually addicted to that stuff. That's bizarre to me. It really is. But not knowing who you are will keep you in a cycle of addiction that will never, ever stop. I promise. If you continue to do the same stuff, like this is pretty basic. I'm not going to be telling you anything here that ought to be earth-shattering. But if you continue to do the exact same things every day, the exact same things will happen, right? It's an old cliche. You want a different life? Don't do the same things and expect a different result. I believe they call that the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing again and again, but thinking you're going to get a different result. That's addiction, right? This time's going to be different. This time I'm not going to use during the week. I'm only going to use on the weekends. This time I'm not going to, none of that shit works. This time, find out who you are. This time, forget all the substance stuff. I promise, getting sober isn't hard. Staying sober is hard. Separate somebody from a drug for 78 hours. They're sober. Staying sober, that takes some effort. You know what, Caroline? Nobody wants to quit. If you're being honest, nobody wants to quit. But here's the deal. I never wanted to quit, ever. I was the person that said, I can quit anytime I want. I just haven't wanted to quit since 1984. All right? It was one of my favorite jokes. If you begin to journal, you might come across some journal entries that might change your mind on that. And what I mean by that is, for a really, really long time, I believed that if I had an unlimited supply of my substance and I didn't have to go out and chase it down and commit crimes and all of that, that my life would be set. But I could drive an hour from here and get my drug of choice for $5 a gram, which means that my $700 a day habit would have cost me about 28 bucks, 30 bucks. I could afford that. What I can't afford is to trade who I've become without that shit in my life. I convinced myself that the best version of me had to have an opiate in its system. See, without that, I wasn't patient, I wasn't kind, I wasn't any of those things. So I was convinced that heroin or any of its cousins, the morphine molecule in general, made me a better person. I believed that shit. And one of the reasons I believed it is remove that from my life and watch what happens, right? I was ready to punch people in the head. I was ready to tear people's heads off. I'll break your fingers. I'm going to get it. But remove it long enough. And I had to start looking at why I was that dude. And I'm telling you right now, if there's an assignment that they give to people. And the assignment was, if there was a pill that I could give you, you take it, you swallow it with water, drugs will never work on you again.
I want to.
Johnny Scoville's answer to that question, by the way, was, could I get 2 of them? I want to do 2. Such the drug addict. But how funny, I mean, this is honestly a question that they do all of the time, right? With people in recovery. If I could give you that pill and you'd swallow it, drugs would never work on you again, right? And take off all the stupid stuff. No, if you're in pain, there's one thing they can give you for that, blah, blah, blah. But you're set. Nothing's ever going to, would you take it? And the same doctor, by the way, I wrote she said, I've never seen anybody answer it the way you did. You know what I wrote? I would pay someone to shove it down my throat because there's no way I would take it on purpose. That was the mindset then. Now what I will tell you is this. I already took that drug. I already swallowed that pill because there's not a drug on this planet that's ever going to work on me again. I'm never going to buy one. I'm never going to ingest one. I'm happy as hell being sober. I cannot get happier with a chemical in my body. I've done that. They're not going to make me happier. I'm perfectly aware of that now. The only difference in my life is I don't spend ungodly amounts of money on poison. I am going to donate a crap load of my money to help build another facility at this rehab center. My brother and I started talking about it, and I said, there are 30 guys there. We can make it 60 easily. That's 30 more people that won't have to live in hell. That's a hell of a lot better than sticking a needle in my arm, I promise you. I haven't done it yet, and I've already got a buzz. It doesn't wear off after 8 hours, but I know I'm not busting on you. Trust and believe. I have been on this planet for 55 years. For 46 of them, I would have kicked a baby through the uprights to get a lifetime supply of heroin. I would have killed a busload of nuns with a smile on my face to get a lifetime supply of heroin. Now you couldn't get heroin in my body with an automatic weapon. No desire. But I'll tell you something, if I broke my leg tomorrow and I had to go in and they had to give me an opiate because I was in so much freaking pain that they had to give me morphine, this is the first time in my life, and no one's ever heard me say this, I promise you, I don't think that I would run back to it. I have been of that belief for so long because it happened to me on multiple occasions. But I am thoroughly convinced that today, if I had to be given an opiate for surgery, I'd walk out of that hospital and I would never think about it again. I've changed my cage. And I don't mean Ecuador. Ecuador brought a lot of crap into focus, right? But that's not what I mean. I mean this cage. You're not going to find any of these answers anywhere but in you. Happiness is going to be in you, right? It's not going to be in another person. There are so many great cliches that really do work, you know? Only I can quote them, but they never meant anything to me. No one's ever going to love me more than I love myself. It's probably why marriages didn't work out for me, because I don't love myself very much. I'm pretty damn fond of me today. To be honest with you, I'm pretty damn fond of myself today. You have got to be able to love yourself. And I do, big time. I'm very happy being me. Dyslexic me. Doesn't bother me anymore. There are people who write a lot better than me. You know, but I do a lot of things as well as anyone on earth. And I don't have a desire to compare myself to anyone anymore for any reason. A says, that's what makes me worry when it comes to people I know that are sober. Is their willpower strong enough to not go back if they ever get in an accident and put on opiates? Here's the deal. Willpower doesn't have anything to do with this. By the way, I believed the exact same thing. In fact, I'm sure that on this program at one time or another, I have said, I don't have the willpower to keep from doing opiates if by some chance. Willpower's got nothing to do with it. If you can answer the question, who are you? And you can answer it honestly, the answer to your question will be, they can go to the hospital and they're not going to become drug addicts. We don't do drug for any other reason than to escape ourselves. You know, people go, wow, kids in really bad situations, you know, if you're dealing with abuse, you're escaping yourself. Though the situation that makes you want to escape yourself might be caused by other people, but you're escaping yourself. And the proof to that is, for every kid whose parents beat them, who became a heroin addict, there are kids whose parents beat them who became a Rhodes Scholar. What's the difference? The difference is that in some cases, those kids were exposed to an outlet. If you take a kid and he gets abused to beat shit, but he lives in a place where there are no drugs, he's not going to become a drug addict. He will learn, she will learn to cope, to deal, to figure it out. And the crazy thing is, this bad boy was $1.80. $700 a day I paid, right? And that was at the end. I'm not joking. When I first got addicted to the crap, it was like $300 a gram. I've spent millions of dollars in my arm, $1.80. And this $1.80 will last me almost a month. And then I just got to go buy another one and write in it. If you can answer the question, who are you? Because there's only going to be two answers. And one of the answers is going to be, I love me. Right? Kelly, I'm with you 100%. Now, I'll tell you this right now because Kelly makes a good point. My faith has more to do with everything I'm talking about today than anything else does. However, I'm talking to a lot of people who don't share my faith. And my biggest fear on the boat is that my belief in my higher power is going to scare someone away before I can help them get sober. Before I can help them answer the question, who are you? Because my experience so far has been that when people get that question answered, they find a belief in a higher power. Try talking to somebody about God when they are putting a needle in their arm. I mean, I love my faith. I love God. But while I was shooting dope, I intentionally put him away. I don't want to hear about that while I'm getting high. I do not want to hear about that. It absolutely interferes with everything I'm doing. And I knew who God was at a young age. I didn't discover him after getting sober. I got back to him after getting sober. But the answer for me, and the answer for so many drug addicts that I've worked with who are clean, and not because of me. I'm not a guru, but I journal my ass off. And the guru that I met made this a very simple equation. You're writing down who you are in a book every day, or you're not going to be successful. And take sobriety off the table. I don't give a crap what we're talking about. You want to be a successful human being, you will be journaling. And if you have another outlet, I know people that say, for me, painting is like journaling. I believe that. There are people who absolutely can distract themselves, but that's not what journaling is. Music can absolutely distract you. It's not what journaling is. It's an outlet. It's your creativity. It's your art. I get that. Journaling is figuring out who the hell you are. And you are going to have to write down and read back to yourself or speak into something and listen back. Because I have read things back and gone, I didn't write this. I don't remember writing this. No memory at all. Because when you start treating journaling like it is a part of your life, not something you do so you can tell your friends you journal, but you seriously want to figure out who you are, you're going to get into a groove where you're doing this number and you're bleeding onto the page through your right or left hand. Trauma from years ago that you don't remember are going to come out. When I say epiphanies, I literally mean epiphanies. I read them back and go, holy shit. How did I not put this and this together? Well, because every time I started feeling this way, I went and got high. Right? Or I lied. Somebody started asking a question that was going to get me close enough to that truth. I shut down. I started lying, saying whatever I had to say. Right? Lying about, I got an appointment I got to be at. What time is it? Holy crap, 8:30. Yeah, I'm running late. I got to go. Out the door. One reason the young ones are not taught longhand is because of the beneficial connection it makes within our mind. Energy woman, if you had told me that 2 years ago, I would have said you're nuts. But I 100% believe that. I believe that there is an absolute drive right now to separate human beings from the knowledge of who they are. We're a hell of a lot easier to control when we're not self-aware, right? We are so in line when we're not self-aware. No, I agree with you 100%. I would have said a couple of years ago you were nuts, but you're not. You're not. I absolutely believe they do not want kids doing any of the things that worked in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. God for freaking bed. Because in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we went to some people that were real easy to control, right? You could never get a society to drug themselves, right? If you said, we're showing up and we're giving you drugs, so you fluoride the hell out of the water, right? Because fluoride that you drink gets right into your teeth, right? Not trying to sound like I wear a tin hat, but this doesn't take much to research. Do you realize that? What is that drug that makes everybody mellow out? First really good antidepressant. Prozac. 40% of Prozac is fluoride. You can look this up. 40%. 40%. It makes us docile. They love a docile society. Then if they showed up and said, we want you to take some drugs. No, you're not going to give me something that's going to make me easier to fall into line. No, I'll go out and pay for it on the street. Don't trip. I'll go get it myself. You don't have to give that to me. I'll steal to get it. And the proof, oh, what a perfect line. Well played, Isis. It's all right. We're all mad here. They do not want us doing the basic things that get you in touch with who you are. It goes against everything. And you can make that spiritual if you want. You can make that governmental if you want. But watch how you're mocked if you start telling people that you journal for an hour a day. Prozac, Caroline, has a lot. Do a little research on it. And I'm not telling you to get off it. If you do, talk to your doctor first. Don't get off anything without talking to your doctor first. For real. Don't quit smoking crack until you talk to a doctor. Why? Because I'm a drug addict. Talk to a professional. While I was partying, they spent 28 years in school. You see what I'm saying? Trust me, talk to a doctor. They have ways to help you quit. I trust doctors. I trust lawyers. And by that, I mean, I will tell them the truth. I don't mean that. Rocket Queen says, I quit taking Prozac and I'm doing I'll tell you what, I quit every antidepressant out there. And I was taking Wellbutrin up until, 3 months ago, something like that. But I don't take anything these days. I've never been happier in my life. But not one doesn't have anything to do with the other. I'll tell you right now, there was a time in my life where if Wellbutrin was not in my life, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. There was a time in my life where where I was, that drug kept me alive. There was a time in my life where that absolutely kept me alive. I told my son who's in recovery that I'm journaling. I'm planting the seed. Barbara, well played. Well played. Uh-oh, Brock Bandy said something genius. I better back up. I think of journaling like defragging your computer. You're dumping all of the garbage so that everything doesn't get bottlenecked and information files more easily. Wow, that's solid. Yeah, that really is genius. I will very often talk about it as the external hard drive. If I'm clogged up in here and things aren't going well, it's because the operating system's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I get in there and, Wellbutrin made my husband's rage issues worse. I don't get that. Well, here's how that works. It works like this. I knew a girl in Texas and she used to get lorazepam. That's Ativan. Ativan is usually given in really small amounts, 0.25 milligrams, 1 milligram, whatever. She used to get 5 milligram Ativans. And she always got the generic. So it was lorazepam, 5 milligrams. One night I said to her, man, I can't sleep. I've been doing a ton of blow. I'm like, I've been up for 2 days. She goes, oh, I got something that'll help you go to sleep. I said, yeah. She goes, yeah, take one of these and drink a beer. Out. I mean, out. 12 hours out, right? So the next day I called her and I said, hey, you want to sell some of those? She said, no, I don't. I said, okay. She goes, but if you come across any speed, give me a call. Now, this was before the proliferation of crystal meth everywhere. Bikers might have had it, but it wasn't all over the place yet. It wasn't crystallized. But I came across some pills, some dexedrines, and I called her and said, I got Dexies, they're speed. She goes, all right, let's get together. We hung out for the night, right? I took lorazepam, didn't drink. She took the Dexies. She was out. I mean, out, nodding, doing the whole trick. So there are people whose brain chemistry is completely different than yours. You give me Wellbutrin, I become the calmest person in the world. You give it to your husband, he becomes a rageaholic. That's reality. This is why if you're being treated for a brain chemical disorder, I know that there are people who either believe wholeheartedly in psychotropic drugs or they are completely against them. I know people who without medication are terrifying. I know good people who off their medication are terrifying because there is an imbalance of chemicals in their brain. I'm not smart enough to tell you the difference between one of those people and another person. Energy Woman, thank you for coming here. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Have a great day. I don't know the difference. I'm not smart enough to be able to tell you the difference between the two. But I do know that for some people, like ADHD medication is speed. You give a hyperactive kid speed. Does that make any sense? None, right? If you give it to the wrong kid, they go bing, ding, 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 and bounce off walls. You give it to the right kid, they fall asleep. Now, it got given out as candy. It's a bad idea. I know all that. Trust me. But everybody's brain chemistry is a little different. I've done enough dope to know that that is the truth. All right, people. I am out the door. I have got to buy a crap load of food for a little get together we're having at a rehab center tomorrow. Between now and the next time I see you, do me a favor, put a little love in your heart. I'm Tommy. Thanks for spending time with me. We will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.